Hello folks, welcome to the TRINI Corner series of Season 8, celebrating 4 years of On the Call. I'm Ozzy Stewart, as you know, and very grateful that you've tuned in to this thank you tour of mine, where I give flowers to deserving impactors within the Trinidadian community and culture. And on this episode, I am so happy to shine light on Dawad Philip and Clem Bowen. Dawad, appreciate the time. Clem, thank you for making it in. Appreciate it, really. And to have you guys together, this is, to me, a historical thing. When was the last time you guys have done anything like this together? When was the last time?
We got lost in upstate trying to get into Canada. We got away from immigration. No, we actually were at a bus tour. It's
How long ago was that?
That had to be before 1999. Huh?
Yeah, before 1999.
Wow. So then, here goes. Clem Bowen, and this is short form history, guys, because there's more to be revealed, but is a mass band founder of Borokit. I think that was for about 14 years or so.
Borokit USA, yes.
Right.
We founded that Borokit USA in 1987.
Okay. He's also a vet, an artist promoter, a booker, a manager, and agent of such artists as Swallow, Marshall Montano, Arrow, Kess, Calypso Rose, Burning Flame, plus, throughout the Caribbean, through his Kerouac management agency, which books, again, soca artists worldwide.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And not only that, he's also involved in the event planning, the productions, acquiring work permits, the whole shebang. He's also president, I just found out, president of the Sunday Connections, which I'm going to go next year, which only happens in July, and I don't know why I didn't know about this, but produces the Sunday brunch on the Green. July's every other Sunday.
The second Sunday in July.
Right. Now, previously though, and just in case you don't know what Borokit is a costume that was made to look like a dancer riding on a donkey, correct?
That's the called a little donkey.
Little donkey.
Yeah, they
Right.
have different forms of Borokit. I think the Spanish people have a Borokit. The Indians have a Borokit. And it's spelled differently.
Right. But yours is B.
Ours was spelled in New York. Borokit was spelled B-O-R-O-K-E-E-T-E.
Got
In Trinidad, Borokit was spelled B-U-R. It was spelled quite differently.
Prior to all of this, though, Clem was also in the aviation business, aviation industry, which we'll get to afterwards. I'm going to move to intro Mr. Philip, spelled with one L, no S. Philip, first name Dawad, D-A-W-A-D. He's a renowned author of 3 volumes of poetry. His poems have appeared in anthologies, including Steppingstones, Bomb, Caribbean Voices, Poetry International, etc., etc. A whole list, guys. This is a mouthful that you see in here. Anyway, he's a recipient of the New York State Fellowship on Arts for Poetry, has performed his works in the Caribbean, US, Canada, Riga, Latvia, Moscow, and St. Petersburg. After living and working in Brooklyn for nearly 4 decades as an artist, poet, journalist, and editor at Amsterdam News, Dawad has resettled in his hometown of San Fernando in Trinidad. One of the things that came to me in my research is that his Mural by the Sea, it's a 2018 film, was filmed by the late playwright, director, with whom I performed back in Trinidad at Carib Theatre, Tony Hall. And this Mural by the Sea is based on selected poems from the book of the same title. Miss Tony. Oh, that smile. Dawad was steeped in the carnival world as a mask maker, costume designer, mask man, journalist, painter, calypso tent manager, promoter, organizer of Carib Theatre Week.
A lot of research.
He still keeps an active hand in the annual Trinidad Carnival via the National Carnival Commission and Juve advisor to T&T Ministry of Culture, is that correct? Right? And thereby keeping our culture's essence eternal through pan, sports, mass kaiso, and a little chutney and lime.
My information would never put sports. I think that would be fraudulent.
Yes. We got
I'm a
that
sports fan.
As a sports fan. And from what I'm understanding, is it possible to say that he'll soon be in the Library of Congress?
Yeah, well, that's
Proud.
That's
Proud to sit down with these two giants. What is wonderful for me is to see the influence, Dawad, in the people that I've worked with, like Tony, Andrew Tanker, who was he and I were really, really close at one time.
Yeah.
Derek Walcott. And to see that you've had a mission of discerning and affirming our Caribbean essence, right? While simultaneously breaking down barriers that may have existed in the larger Black world and beyond. My question to you first would be, how do those barriers look now?
Well, part of the thing is that we were talking about that, Clem and I. If you go back to where we would have landed in America, it was in the 60s. And therefore, it was not an easy community to identify, that Caribbean ethos, and doesn't mean that it wasn't there, because in Harlem, the Caribbean community was there. But things that brought the community together, when I arrived in Brooklyn, these things were just in the embryonic stage. They were, ideas in people's heads. What was clearly there was that there was the stuff that we brought in our DNA, so that a lot of the bands, a lot of the names affiliated with the music scene, some of them had by then moved either permanently or were coming here with a frequency, so that they got involved with music, much as they did in Harlem, like with Gerald Clark and Daphne Weeks and these folks. But in Brooklyn, it would have been folks like Beverly Griffith and Sid Joe and Bert Bailey and Les Sargent and then Scipio Sargent and Andre, and so that was happening. And we were talking about that. So the parties were basement parties, private homes. And then that kind of started to expand, because by then the communities were growing, in the 70s, there was a really large influx of Caribbean people, and in that wave, a huge amount were Trinidadians. With that influx, you were able to have huge bands, a proliferation of pan going on all over Brooklyn.
But I have a question to ask, and maybe Clem, I'll ask you this one. There has been the influence of the Jamaicans, or the input by the Jamaicans, the Guyanese, the Grenadians. How did that influence what the Trinidadians were doing?
I think we influenced them.
Okay.
Back then, in terms of mass production, back when they first started, primarily all the bands, the costume band, I think Antigua and St. Vincent might be, correct me if I'm wrong, might be the only two other islands.
St. Thomas.
And St. Thomas, the Virgin Islands, that really produced costume masks. So for a lot of the other spectators. I can't call them revelers because they weren't really revelers.
Right.
They come up on the parkway, but they actually didn't jump into the bands. They would stand and look.
Right.
You know.
You had, that's in the organizational end, you had this guy Lezama who's Venezuelan, you know, and you have different people, you know, who got involved in the Trinidadian thing, but they were not from Trinidad, who were impactful.
Well, Carlos is a unique case. Carlos, yes, he was born in Venezuela, but Carlos was raised in Trinidad.
Right.
And he lived there, he married, grew up there, he went to school, he married, and from there went back to Venezuela and worked his way by boat as a seaman into Trinidad. But that's common with, you first have to recognize that Trinidad, I always think that if Trinidad resembles New York, because it is a melting pot.
Right.
Trinidad is really a place where all these people came from all over the world, and opportunities were in Trinidad and they came. So whether it was the Chinese in the early years after, slavery,
Right.
the European and slavery, and the indigenous peoples, the first set of immigrants would have been the Chinese, and then the Indians who came as indentiates. But we all came from a different place. If you speak to a Trinidadian, you ask them for their family background, you'll find out there's a grandmother from Grenada, Barbados, a father from St. Vincent, because the opportunities were there in Trinidad, because Trinidad was a place resettled or settled by after the settler population. So people were coming there, they were finding work because the whole place was being built. Trinidad was really a wasteland, you know. But once they started to they brought the French planters, and the French planters brought their slaves, and then encouraged by giving them vast land grants, you know, the cedula, and then the word got out so that where the first French planters were coming from Haiti, the rest of them started to come from St. Vincent and then all the little were coming from Nevis and all these other islands, Barbados, into Trinidad, because now agriculture, they have a whole agriculture-based economy, cocoa, coffee, sugar cane, all these things, so that it was a settled place, you know. So that is where you have a lot of that. These people have Caribbean backgrounds as opposed to essentially Trinidadian, native Trinidad. The only native Trinidadians were the Caribs and Arawaks. Yeah.
So, going to the organization, I kind of stuck based on conversations I've had previously. You had UWIDA, which is the United West Indian Development Association back in the day, right? Under Lezamo, and it's changed to WIADCA, which is now the West Indian American Day Carnival Association, or otherwise known as the Association. With all that has happened with associations and organizations, is Carnival still considered the world's greatest export to those within or without, the diaspora?
But before any one of us answer, I want to make it clear that before we get to Lezama in our conversation with particularly the Brooklyn Carnival, you must mention that Rufus Goring is the man who brought the carnival from Harlem.
Right.
When there was a riot in the 60s and they closed down the carnival, took away the permit, Rufus moved to Brooklyn. And Rufus started with the same passion. Rufus was making a bat costume and going through the hallways of his apartment building down on Brevard and playing a one-man mask for Carnival. Jumpy in his head, just playing mask. And then he decided he'd come out in the streets. Carnival was planned to coincide with the Trinidad Carnival.
Right.
So, but Trinidad Carnival is in February.
Right.
Lord, Father, trying to play mass in
In
Harlem in the middle of winter in February. So what they did, they had the carnivals, but they had them indoors.
Right.
First from the houses, just like we're doing with the basement parties in the early.
Yeah.
The earliest carnivals were in your house, and maybe you try to go out in the yard or so if you did have a private home, but mostly apartment buildings, and then they started to have small halls. But the thing that impresses me is that when you hear about the halls that they were having carnival dances in Harlem, was Renaissance and the Savoy and Uptown, the Uptown renowned places. We have a Wishco Manor, an Aristocrat, and all of these minor compared to those
Right.
big ballrooms uptown. And it even outgrew that. So by the time Jessie Waddle, who had come up from Trinidad in 26, she looked at that, she says, no, this carnival, if we're going to have a carnival, let's have a carnival.
Right.
And she petitioned and got the permit to have the first street parade right after World War II.
Right.
It corresponded with the calypso, that the rise of calypso as well. Because when you look at the history of the vanguard and the calypsonians coming through New York on their way to England, the impact they had on the venues in Manhattan, you know, they were taken slightly at first, but when the proprietors, the club owners, saw the impact and saw the revenue coming in from people in line
Right.
waiting to see a calypsonian,
Right.
it had a big impact on,
Right.
on the whole industry,
I
the
read-
carnival, calypso
yes.
industry.
Yes.
And importantly, you have to remember that the first recorded calypsos were in New York. First by
Correct.
Lovey
Correct.
and his, what they call the Paseo music that was recorded in New York, and then Lionel Belasco, all thing. And by then, you know, the folks who were in the industry realized that we could make some money, and they brought some of the calypsonians, including Attila, Lion, Growling Tiger, and those guys brought them to New York and did the very first major recording of calypso. You know, but like I said, Belasco was recording. So, but all the recording history is New York. So New York is, you know, linked to this whole thing conversation. So that what Clem is doing is just the continuation of that tradition, you know.
One of the things that I've been hearing is that, you know, the New York has been great. And there's a bubbling of, well, it's no longer, because people are moving out to Miami or, you know, other places. Why, in your estimation, that has been happening? And has it been affecting the music more so, or the Labor Day parade mass scenario?
I think when you think about not just Miami, when you look at Toronto's carnival, when you look at Miami's carnival, and you look at the whole infrastructure,
Yeah.
we talk about a lot of revenue coming in for Labor Day, but yet you would find that New Yorkers go to Miami, or people even from Boston, from Washington, from places, they go to Miami and they see it as a mini vacation, because you can do so much in Miami Carnival. You can go to the beaches, you can, there are hotels there.
So it has
Airbnb.
nothing, you think, to do, because the other rumbling is, well, you know, things have changed because of the crime and the NYPD and the barriers, and you can't walk in or out, and you know.
Oh, well, yeah, we've seen, I don't know, well,
So it's depressed a little, it's been depressed a
for
little.
us who have experienced both worlds, those days were much better.
Right.
The freedom you had. Remember then, I think NYPD at that time used to send police officers to Trinidad to observe Trinidad Carnival, to get a better understanding of how Trinidad Carnival was. So we had more dialogue. At that time, I used to go to a lot of meetings in the precinct. So we had face-to-face conversations. We could be on the parkway, for example, and a police officer can come to our band and says, "No, you guys, you got to go this way." And I could say, "Listen, I'll call Sergeant so and so, call so and so," because I was in a meeting with that officer. The officer, there was an officer, Bill Jackson, I think, community affairs officer. He was pretty much in charge of most of the officers. They knew the route. We, the band leaders, had that dialogue with them. But that's only one aspect of it. It's not just the mass band. The entertainment industry has changed as well.
Correct.
There was a time when all the calypsonians, all the artists, all the bands would come to New York and stay for the entire summer. And then they would go out of New York to do the jobs. They go to the Boston, they go DC, they go Baltimore, they go Miami, they go Fort Lauderdale, they go all over. They go to London out of New York. That's no longer happening because the whole industry has changed. Today, the artists see themselves as on another level. So,
What does that mean?
20 years ago, a band or an artist will come to New York and stay at a friend's house. We can put them up in a house, and they'll be quite comfortable. Today, the artists, the younger artists, when they come here, they want hotel accommodation. They want per diem for the day. That's food money for the day.
And the manager.
And their manager.
And publicist if depending.
Right? So it's no longer affordable for a promoter. You know, I because of what I do, there are times I'm between a rock and a hard place. Because even though I'm the agent for certain artists, I feel sometimes a bit, I'm sympathetic sometimes to the promoter. Because I don't see the promoter making the dollars they used to make.
Right.
In most cases, I see them losing because they can't afford it anymore. So we've reached a point now where at some point the bubble's going to bust. You know.
What does that mean?
It means that unless we're not seeing bands coming through anymore. So we know, we've seen that there. We see the Kess and what's the other band? Out of Trinidad I'm speaking of. We see the Kess coming through. We see Marshall Montano and his band coming. We see Dilinadan coming through. But Dilinadan is more affordable than the other two. Promoters now cannot host an event in, let's say, the Tilden Hall, a venue that size anymore. Because what he has to pay the band, the revenue from that event cannot pay the band. He has to go into a stadium. He has to go, and how many promoters can do that? So you have a lot more promoters now, but they're doing smaller parties. They're doing DJ parties. So we're seeing a decline in what we used to have in the 70s. The 70s, you had the Boost Taylor, you had the McLeod, you had these are all promoters I'm calling, right? And they used to have several events around Labor Day, right? But we don't have that anymore. We might have the big venue, the Marshall Montano in a big venue, in a stadium. We might have Kess in a stadium, right? But all the other events are pretty much DJs.
I think Clem might have had something to do with that.
Explain, please.
Well, Clem had to look after the interests of his artists.
Right.
And the model was the larger. This is New York, and the larger model would be that kind of thing. But there is an element of truth
Yeah.
to it, because the guys would have come up from Trinidad, but they come up with an idea in their head. This is New York, so therefore, so whereas we would get a house and put a whole band, the agent here is going to kill us if I can't provide that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And he's looking out for me,
Right.
But what I'm saying is, we painted ourselves into a corner. Progress has done that. I mean, you have to admit that.
Yeah.
It is that you first have to understand that the culture of calypso, Trinidad is a unique place. And what I mean by that is that Trinidad is the only place I knew, in the midst of all this world entertainment I would have been around, where the calypso king, the biggest calypso star, is going to be liming on the corner. And he's not going to arrive for a show in a limousine.
Right.
He's going to, because calypso is the people.
Right.
And it's almost, you cannot, as a real genuine voice of the people, show up as coming people will say, oh, so what are you on by?
Right.
What see me on by?
That's right.
And that's why there was a time when the average calypsonian or the average artist would get on a plane and sit in economy
Yeah.
and have conversations with the passengers on the airplane, because they knew who he was.
Belong to the people.
And he belonged to the people. Today, I cannot put one of my artists in economy.
Right.
They want to be in first class,
Right.
right? They've separated themselves
Yeah.
from the people who put them up there. And I worry about that, because
That's a
even
difficult thing.
I'll give you an example. There was a club in Washington, D.C. called Crossroads. And the owner of the club was Jamaican guy, Gale was his last name. I could bring up Tony Carr, who was a Jamaican DJ, a radio personality in Washington. And through Tony, I get to meet Mr. Gale. And Traffic was performing there one night for them. The band Traffic, which I managed.
That has to do with the CD.
CD race.
Right here.
And unfortunately, the promoter didn't do well that night, because the event was the same night as Atlanta Carnival, and you were involved in Atlanta back in those days, where everyone went to Atlanta for Atlanta Carnival. And while the band was on stage, now, this is a promoter who came to the hotel, paid me all the money, did everything that he's supposed to do, did it correctly. And when I realized that the show wasn't doing well at all, hadn't done well at all, and he paid all the money, I said to the owner of the band, I said, listen, I think we need to give this guy back a little change, because this guy didn't do well and he paid everything. They said, okay. So I went to him after the show. I said, listen, this is a little something back from the band. We realized you didn't do well, but thanks for everything. And he said, why are you doing this? And I said, well, you feed us. And I want you to continue feeding us. And from that day on, I was able to call that promoter and ask him anytime I had someone coming in, whether I had other jobs, I could say, listen, can I get a spot? And so we built relationships, right? Today, you don't see that happening. I used to send thank you notes, thank you cards to every promoter I dealt with.
People don't realize how important.
So we built relationships, right? And that is not happening today.
Guy makes a record, and it hasn't even been playing on the radio. He starts talking about let your people talk to my people. You know what I'm saying? What is this, man? You know what I mean? We just kind of
and for me, it's difficult
lost our
because
way,
even
man.
though I represent the artists,
Right.
I'm a promoter as well.
Right.
And I live in Brooklyn, and I have to see these promoters all the time. When I go to Miami, I have to see them.
Right.
And I have to feel for them,
Right.
because they want to keep the culture alive. They want to do things,
Right.
but they also want to make a little bit of money.
Right. Passion versus profit.
You know, and unlike back in the day where people understood the demographics and say, well, listen, it's important that I need to know how many people that look like us in that area that will support this event. Right? There are so many aspects of this. You know, I was on the road with Arrow for years when Hot 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 was I was the driver. And Arrow used to work on a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday, Friday, and maybe Saturday for our communities. But we were in places like Portland, Maine, and Cambridge, Massachusetts, and areas that these artists today are not going to. Right? They're prepared to work and charge a lot of money for Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday. But they're not getting into the areas where the Timbuktu, for example, I'm just using that. Where people have heard of calypso, but have never seen a calypso.
Right.
They've heard of soca, but they've never seen a soca artist. And that's where you need to be during the week.
How early were you guys introduced to or exposed to Carnival? Because your mind with the knowledge and stuff that you have, both of you. I mean,
He's been there.
Yeah. Well,
and also, how early, but through which medium? Was it the mass, the steel band, you know?
Well, yeah. Well, in all aspects, because I think I'm still trying to come to terms with my first attempt to want to play mass, and at about 4, my grandmother telling me, no, you can't. And I cried. I think I cried the whole carnival. I cried because I'm watching my big cousins, and you know, everybody's getting their gear together. So Carnival, I was born in an environment of Carnival. Where I come from on Lord Street is that area is called Sando proper, meaning that I am from the heart of San Fernando.
Right.
I was born 45G Harris Promenade. You can't get more proper than me.
Right.
So, but it's a yard, it's a barrack yard.
Yeah.
But in that barrack yard is all the aspects of the carnival traditions. So in that yard, in one of those barracks, you would see a rubber costume being made, one is a black Indian being made, one is, and by the way, this is where Stalin grew up also, so, you know, you would see the minstrels and this kind of thing. So this is what nurtured my creative spirit in the carnival. And then I was fortunate to be born with some artistic skills. So early when I started drawing the things I saw for Carnival. And then, of course, it moved one of the teachers in primary school to see the drawings and say, listen, we want to bring a Carnival band. And at that point, another teacher was bringing some old pants from a band in Marabella that had broken up. So we formed the first steel band, and we brought a band called Viva Zapata.
Viva Zapata.
Viva Zapata, which gave me the chance to draw this mask, because that was the happiest thing for me. Just the idea to draw mask, because as a boy living in the heart of town, I'm walking behind all the Indians, I'm holding their money purse for them, holding a tomahawk, going with them, chanting along with them. But the opportunity to have a hands-on, and then to see the whole theater of Carnival happening around me, because most of these things came with theater, whether it is the rubber,
right.
whether it is the minstrels,
right.
whether it's the Indians, the sailor, Stalin, to this day, there are people who would tell you the best fireman they ever saw dance, a fireman dance, was Stalin.
I played a lot of sports. I ran track, I played soccer, I played cricket. So when I came to New York, I was 19. And most of my relatives, and going back to what Dawad said earlier on, my grandmother is from Nevis, was from Nevis.
Uh-huh.
My great-grandfather was from Barbados. And he came to Trinidad as a pan boiler, which I don't know if you know, before the sugar factories, they had these people that made the sugar on the estates for them. So he was brought from Barbados up in the estate to do that. So when I came to New York, I was living with my grandmother's sister. Her children were my mother's age, and their children were my age. So most of my relatives here, because she had several siblings, were all Americans. And that was those were the people I was associating with. Those are the people I was mingling with. And then I ran into a friend of mine who says to me, I used to play soccer. He said, why don't you come and play soccer? And I said, well, who? So he says, yeah, we have this team, Brooklyn Juniors. So I went to Brooklyn Juniors, I joined their soccer team, and my life changed from then on. Then I was back into my training ways. And the thing is, even at that time, I just did the things in the club the group did, but I was never into entertainment. I got into entertainment by accident. I left to go to work in Egypt. My company sent me to Egypt, and then they sent me to Saudi Arabia. And for the years in Saudi Arabia, that's when I started missing my culture. I didn't even know anything about DJing, but I loved my music and I wanted to expose it. So Glenn Cullen, Mills Brothers, I asked him to send me some equipment. So I got the equipment in Saudi Arabia and I started DJing in Saudi. I wasn't a good DJ, I can tell you that.
Well, you have to start somewhere.
Terrible DJ. But I played at the British Embassy a little bit. I had parties in my villa. I would have all the expats would come to my villa to parties, And that's when I started saying, you know what? I just found something that I really want to do. I came back to New York after being over 10 years. Aro, who I knew for years, said to me, what are you doing with that van? Because I had a brand new 16-seater Ford van that the company had given me because they had owed me some money. They said, take the van. And he says, well, you know what? I'm going to be touring a lot. Why don't you take the band and I on tour? And that's what I did. And that's how I got into the business.
Right.
I started driving him.
Right.
And he had some jobs through Third World Booking Agency, which is in SOBs,
Right.
called SOBs.
Yeah, of course.
Right. Larry Gold, who owns SOBs,
Right.
he had a booking agency on the top floor called Third World Talent Agency. And then Larry had me taking some of his people on tour. The Jamaican artist singer, Sister Carol and Sugar Minot. And then I ran into Alex Borsell, who is probably the biggest agent here for African music. So I started taking people like Baba Mal and Bundi Boys out of South Africa, Loketo out of Zaire. I was taking them on tour. I was taking Sugar Minot, everybody on tour. And being on tour with them, I started to learn the circuit. Because sometimes the road manager couldn't make it. So they would give me that opportunity to be the road manager. So I started learning the business that way.
So, how did you two meet?
That's a good question.
Brooklyn,
Brooklyn, because I didn't even know Clem was from Princeton until much later. So we were born and raised not far from each other. And then I found out that Vaughn Martin, who has the biggest Caribbean radio show in the DC area, was from Princeton.
Yeah, I knew Vaughn's father, I knew Vaughn's brother, I knew Vaughn very well growing up.
Our paths, and I think it started maybe with Borokeets, because I started to hang with Borokeets. Everybody was hanging with Borokeets, Borokeets Hawks thing. And knowing what he did, so there might have been some artists conversations around that. I don't even remember. But I do know that when I needed help, he saw what I was doing, and I knew what he was doing, and I knew that I would need his help.
What concerns you guys now about, the carnival scene? I mean, really.
I'm not seeing the sponsorships there anymore. When I was the PR for Brookie, there were times when I would have sent sponsors to another mass camp because we couldn't take any more sponsors. Because at the end of the day, sponsors want visibility for their money, for their investment.
I mean, one product duplication.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think they've seen that, and the sponsors have not seen that anymore. Because basically, if you walk on Eastern Parkway, and
more and more the people who are in charge of the carnival, for whatever their misjudgments or lack of vision, the remaining bands outside of Sesame Flyers, who has remained, but most of the big bands that made the Parkway was splintered, but also the biggest bands started to move the operation to Miami because there was less bureaucratic foolishness. Their needs were addressed. See, that's the thing. This carnival, nobody they took for granted, took the producers of the carnival for granted. The other carnivals were saying, no, we want you all to come down here. We could give you this, we could do that. It just made sense. There's a better package, as Clem is saying. When you come to Miami to play mass, you can have a whole weekend of fun. You play mass on Eastern Parkway, you come out there 1 o'clock. You're lucky if you reach half the route.
So what, with the state of Carnival, for Carnival at this point, what would you like to see the association or whomever is in charge achieve?
As a Brooklynite, I would like to see it go back to the hours on the Parkway, the lengthy hours. A lot of times we used to be on the Parkway by 11, and we would get off the Parkway about 6. So I would love to see that because it's only one day. So if you're going to pay that money for your costume, you should be able to have that time to enjoy it.
But are there also enough bands to make that happen at this point?
I don't know if there are enough mass bands to make that happen. But the whole idea is to encourage mass bands to come back. So that is a possibility. The second thing is to create incentives for the mass producers because people want something. You want to encourage them to come on the Parkway. That's why they go to different cities now. You want to give them that encouragement to come back. There might be a lot of other political things that I can't understand. I can't answer. Maybe this might be crazy, but maybe a venue change.
Ooh, okay.
I don't know if that's something they want to think about. But the whole idea is to be able to give people a little bit more time to change it. So what might have worked 20 years ago may not work today.
Well, what do you say about that, Dawad?
Well, he's right. The thing is that we are all consumers, and if I think I'm putting out X amount of dollars and I'm being rushed off the Parkway, spending all this money to play mass for 3 hours, and I could take that costume and go that money and go to Miami and have a beach and have a pool and have all of these things, then it stands to reason we're going to continue to lose. But the thing is that the people who are responsible for the carnival, I want to feel that they're not tuned into this. It's troubling, and I hope I'm wrong, because what I'm saying is that since COVID, the carnival has become, in these couple of years, it has become a parade like the Puerto Rican parade or like the Dominican parade. It's floats. Brooklyn Labor Day was a carnival. Carnival with masqueraders, with revelers, with live music, with You know, and part of the thing that is it too. The live music aspect of the carnival has disappeared. You know, I remember the first year, 1976, I got the crazy idea to put Callian on Eastern Parkway. Of course, Callian had just put out this brand new album,
Disco reggae.
Disco Reggae. And I thought that if I got Callian on Eastern Parkway, I would have the whole parkway with me. But I didn't know how to market that. So Callian agreed to come on the parkway, so I teamed up with Airports Mechanics. Well, we didn't have a big band, but what we had the whole parkway coming up the road with Callian. So what I'm saying is that's the kind of thing. In the years that traffic was on the parkway, the years when Marshall was on the parkway, the years when what pumped me up band? Crossfire and all these bands were coming. When you look on the parkway, it was a massive humanity. That energy is what moved the thing. I think we need to talk about that. I think we need to look at what listen to the producers. The pan still after from 1969 to now, 60 something years at least. The pans still don't have a permanent space. Every year is a struggle, and with the new gentrified reality that is New York now and Brooklyn, people come into the community to live and dictate the terms for the community that you came and met.
Right.
So you come in there and suddenly you want to call the police because you can't take this noise these people are making.
Right.
You came and you met that.
That was your choice.
You made the choice to live here.
Right.
You don't want to do that, go somewhere.
Right.
But we know the realities of that, that history and where that's going. The Jewish community in Eastern Parkway, at least they have learned to coexist. They're not happy,
Right.
They would just as soon not have Labor Day,
Right.
especially after the riots, the Crown Heights
Right.
riots.
Right.
But we have persisted and we've remained a part of the community because this is the community we built.
Right.
The Hasidic community expanded after the Caribbean community and the Black American community held firm and held on to their properties and held on to their culture and built that. People were bought out. Crown Heights, most of these residents were bought out, and then the Hasidics replaced them, which is cool. The human movement.
Right.
It's the movement of the people.
Right.
But don't come to dictate terms that we labor to put in place.
Right.
And that's what's happening right now with the carnival.
Right.
So for all these reasons, and then there are no incentives for the mass.
And there are less out-of-towners coming into New York now for Labor Day than
Right.
before.
Because there's less attraction.
Right.
The entertainment level has just gone down to zero.
Right.
We could have there would have been backyards all over Brooklyn.
Right.
Friday night when you go by Borough Keats, it's poor police, imagine that, have to direct traffic because you can't pass by Borough Keats, you can't pass by Hawks, you can't pass by Sesame, you can't pass, forget Coffee Boys.
But you see, the thing about it, sponsorship, going back to sponsorship, the bands today, with the meager amount of masqueraders they have, they cannot
Make a profit.
that kind of entertainment on the park.
Yes.
If you could be remembered for one thing, with all that you guys have done, and you guys have done like a lot, one thing, you have only one thing, what would that be? Clem.
You know, my deceased wife told me about 2 or 3 weeks before she passed, she told me, she said, "You really enjoy what you do, Clem. Don't ever stop doing it." And I say that all the time. I don't know if there's any one particular thing.
Yeah, but that in itself is a thing. That in itself is a big thing. Somebody giving you that.
Yeah, she said, "You really," and I tell you this, around this time of the year, when people call the house to look for me, she said, "Call the other house." He's in the other house. Won't keep asking.
What about you, Dawad?
Well, for me, I think I would want to see the things that we were able to put together to have continuity. The things I'm proud of the work that I did with the veteran calypsonians. Very, very proud of that because that's part of it, the Living Legends, the Glamour Boys again. And that Living Legends series ran for 10 years. And then the Caribbean Theatre Week, which was a huge piece also, which we did like things like Gina and Dinah with Tony Hall, and then came into the Calypso tent, the Big Apple Calypso tent. All of those things, we actually created a movement in that the Living Legends brought a whole new rebirth for vintage music. Just like you had with rock and roll and you had with R&B, the vintage era of calypso brought people out. For the first time, Blakey would ever leave Trinidad to come to perform in America was in those days. So Blakey, that introduction, which is a play that I've written it into a play now, producing that. And so the Glamour Boys,
So,
King
as
Fighter.
we get to that now, what is the difference between Glamour Boys and Saga Boys?
Well, technically there are no differences, but
They used to call my father Saga Boy.
A Saga Boy. But you see, Saga Boys are dandies. In the American lingo, the dandies,
Yes.
jitterbugs. And, they look dress up nice, smelling nice, and all the girls and all of that. They didn't work too hard. But they work more with their wits and
Right.
and that sort of thing. But the Glamour Boys particularly came out of Sparrow's song Gina and Dinah, which opens the Glamour Boys again. We are going to rule Port of Spain because the Glamour Boys was Sparrow's the clique.
I want to ask you something. If you had to sit with any historical figure, I'm thinking about all the stuff that you've written and whatnot. Which one figure would that be? It just kind of.
Ask Clem. Let me think about it.
Yes.
When I knew him, he wasn't as popular as when I came to America. Would be Maestro.
Really? Why? Why Maestro?
I knew Maestro very well. We lived in the same Princestown. But his rise was after I left. And I never really got a chance to sit with him. And there are a lot of things I would like to know about the evolution of the soca music. And I think I could only get that from him.
What about you, Dawad?
Well, similarly, you see, with me, that's why I asked you go first, because it depends on what part of my life you want to talk about. Because I'm a poet, and therefore I could tell you who are the poets I would want to have conversations with.
Right.
I used to love to be around Amiri Baraka. Just his humor. I just love Amiri around because what would come out of his mouth, and that's in poetry. I like the company of Kamau Brathwaite. Trouble, but still love that. If in Calypso, it's always gonna be Stalin, because we grew up together. He's 7 years older than me, but he was big brother, so a lot of things, the mass is a funny thing. I was after I left Trinidad, New York, I went back to Trinidad and brought bands for several years, won about 4 national queens and that sort of thing. But in the carnival part of it, just my whole crew to be together, Mervyn Taylor and all these guys. We had major fun. Michael Metiver, who just came in here. These are the guys around me. So I still find that solace. But this year I lost one of my key soldiers, Shabaka Thompson, who came out of England as an actor. But born on Charlotte Street, so Shabaka would be a person I am missing terribly, because I know how I would build a mass without Shabaka. And that kind of, so different people for different reasons.
Got it.
But Stalin, Shabaka, and
Right.
yeah.
And just a quick update on the book and your other projects.
Okay, well, the book, Idima, which means we are a proud nation, it comes from the Indian mass traditions of San Fernando, and it is a call and response, so that the Indian chief would say, Etu namuna pai, which means, who are we? Tell them who we are. And his warriors would declare, Idima, we are a proud nation. That's what it means. So we are a proud nation. So Idima, in the context of the carnival, it speaks to the traditions of San Fernando and how that influenced the larger carnival. Whether in the music, Maestro going to Port of Spain, Stalin going to Port of Spain, Shorty developing the music, Invader invading the world with rum and Coca-Cola, Lord Creator invading the whole of England and Europe with Kingston Town for UB40, and Harry Belafonte singing Melody Song, who was born on La Pique Hill in San Fernando. So that is what this book does. But the very conversation and the essence of what we're dealing with today is my passion now to write the book of the New York story, Carnival story, which would have begun in 1923 in Harlem. So to write that 100 years, that is my passion right now.
And Mr. Clem?
We started in
It's in the history books.
in 1987, and we won 2 bands of the year. Indian is an Indian, and
The African mass, yeah.
But more so, I think we probably had the first Trinidad style mass camp when we opened our mass camp on 38th and Church. Formerly, the place was called the Shell, but nobody remembers it as the Shell. They will remember it forever as Borough East Mass Camp. In terms of entertainment, I think we did everything. We changed the game to an entertainment. At one point, we had on a Labor Day weekend, we had 2 venues. We had 4 bands, 2 bands in each venue, so you could pay in one price and get on a shuttle bus, go to the other venue if you didn't like that venue. We did a lot of things. We did the first big boat ride in Miami, where we had Swallow and Traffic, and we did the Fets in Miami. We even had a song, Borough Woman, written about Borough. And I must say this, that at one point, most of the groups that splintered off after, at one point, whether it was Sesame Flyers, whether it was Blackfoot, whether it was Flag Woman, whether it was Utica Boys, they were all part of Borough. They were all sections in Borough. So we could boast at one point of having over 3,000 masqueraders on the Parkway Labor Day. At one time we had 2 trucks for DJs and 2 trucks. We had Cannonball out of Guyana. We had Taxi. We had GB Production and Madman Maddie. All 4 trucks on Eastern Parkway. We can boast of having the first mass band to put Crossfire on the Parkway, put Traffic on the Parkway for many years. And it was just, at one point we had a Borough in Miami. We had a Borough in Boston. Atlanta. There was a Borough in London. We were not responsible for the London part of it. But that was...
The franchise was spreading.
Right, the franchise was spreading. So, and let me just clarify one thing.
Yes.
In the opening statements, we named a lot of artists, the Kessler, the Marshall. Carnival Agency is not just a booking agency. Carnival Agency also provides work permits for the artists that are under Carnivac's management. So I'm no longer involved with Marshall Montano, but when Carnival Agency was the booking agency for Marshall Montano, he handled all their work permits, handled Kess work permits, handles the list. It's a long list. Right. But I want to clarify that.
Absolutely. I've had a blast. I've really had a blast sitting down there with these 2 gentlemen. And by the way, does Dawad mean anything?
Yeah, it means traveler in Amharic.
Wow. And it kind of fits
I
with all
think
that
so.
you've done.
It almost is.
You've been traveling different worlds almost within this world.
Yep, that's it.
I want to thank you guys very, very much for, taking the time and to letting us in. I feel like this needs another, like a part 2, So don't be, I am sure, and I'm like, there's so much to dig into. Thank you very, very much. Dawad Philip, Mr. Clem Bowen, thank you guys. Thank you to JC, James, Kevin, and the OTC team, and to you, my audience, thank you for spending your valuable time with us today. And remember, please care to share. And when you're on your beat, stay on the sunny side of the street safely. Be conscious and kind to one another. And don't forget to give thanks for the little and big gifts as we strive to live a beautiful life. Till the next time, Mr. Dawad Philip and Mr. Clem Bowen. Trinidad culture deep, deep, deep.